Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Way Forward Workshop Leader Lunch Break. We are pleased to welcome Gabriella Kreuz to our session today. You may recognize her as a reporter for WOIO, as the in-park host for the Cleveland Indians, now Guardians, the on-air personality for Fox Sports and the host of the Beer Money Trivia Show, or as an actress and model. What you may not know is that her energies and passions are primarily spent in the nonprofit that she founded, Love Doesn't Shove. She is on a mission to end teen dating violence and to educate all people on what constitutes a healthy relationship. She is the voice of awakening and recognizing abuse in a relationship that she once was in. She's a very accomplished woman, an athlete and NCAA All-American, a scholar, a product of St. Joseph Academy, John Carroll University, and the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. Her work has been recognized by Crain's Cleveland Business and by Cleveland Magazine because her work is a gift to others. So thank you for joining us, Gabriella, and I turn it over to you.
Gee, thank you for such an intro. So much homework went into that. I appreciate it. And thank you for thinking of me for speaking today. I guess I could just start with what my program's all about. Love Doesn't Shove. I've been going since, 2014. I started at John Carroll when I was a senior, just to get a little campus discussion going about what's healthy in a relationship. And it kind of evolved from there because I ended up switching my minor to sociology. I was very interested in human behavior and understanding why people might behave in abusive ways. And that was actually very healing to get that education. So I transferred that right into Love Doesn't Shove. I thought that it would be valuable. I was like, why do we have to minor in this to know some of these very important and valuable skills about building and maintaining healthy relationships? One of the studies I like to use in my presentations now is that Harvard did a 75-year study about the key to happiness. They researched and observed all kinds of people from all over for 75 years. And what they found was that it wasn't money or people's gender, what color they were, what neighborhood they grew up in, whose parents they had, that made them happy. What made people happy was the quality of their relationships. What it was saying in essence was that the quality of your life is super dictated by the quality of your relationships. So my goal with Love Doesn't Shove is to help equip students with the tools to build those. So yeah, Love Doesn't Shove was inspired by my own experiences of violence, but it's never to generalize in my presentations, about, all men are abusive. That's not the mission or the message of my organization. My goal is to facilitate an interactive conversation with young people and helping them identify those red flag behaviors. What does healthy look like? What kinds of behavior patterns are unhealthy in a relationship? And, some people might think it's common sense, but the reality is everybody comes from a different home environment. Everybody comes from different observations and experiences of what they think is love based on their upbringing. That's a big part of it. So, we know that people who grow up in a chaotic home or experience neglect or experience abuse are more likely then to build relationships and perpetrate those behaviors, or the flip side, become tolerant of those same types of behaviors when they go to build relationships and friendships and things like that. So unless we have the conversation, we really get the nitty gritty, get into schools, spark that conversation, use my personality, talk about social media, talk about ghosting, talk about these things that are on their hearts and the things that they're really dealing with. And really pinpoint the behaviors that we're experiencing and put them into categories. Okay, what is healthy? What is normal? What is compromise or meeting halfway versus the opposite of what does justifying, minimizing, blaming hurtful behavior on your partner look like? So I'm really into illustrating those types of things for students. We'll go through scenarios. Sometimes they'll act them out. I love when students, who really loves to do that, St. Ignatius, They're so great. They're one of my sticky customers. I do their health classes every semester, but they're great at, the students get into it. I don't think it has to be a dark, negative conversation. That's really not my intent either. It's just to have an honest and informative conversation, and to really be able to help kids to notice and understand and identify, again, those patterns of behavior, because that's what abuse really is, or manipulation. It's a repeated pattern of behavior that somebody is either, I don't want to say incapable, but most of the time unwilling to change their hurtful behavior or take accountability for it. So, I'm trying to help students, and the research tells us that your best form of violence prevention is through education. So that's why I've become very passionate about this. At no point did I think this was going to be part of my career, but it's become a little bit of, I've really invested time and energy and resources to keep this going, just because I think it really is valuable. All I need is the one student or the few students after a presentation who come to me and say how much it meant to them, boys and girls alike. That's why I'm so inspired to keep it going, because I know even if we're just helping one person, we've done a lot. And at the bare minimum, I feel like I've at least hopefully planted a seed, with young people about what to look for. And, they might hear this message over and over again. And sometimes it takes someone one more time to hear that message. We know that on average, it takes somebody 7 tries to leave an abusive partner. It's hard. We're not robots. We're emotional beings. So when you're emotionally invested in someone and you love them and you care about them, it can be really hard to come to grips with the fact that they're also mistreating you. And it becomes a high and lows and highs and lows. It changes the chemistry in your brain. A toxic relationship is not the same as a regular healthy relationship. So anyway, that's kind of my organization in a nutshell, and why I'm so passionate about it and still going strong with it, trying to keep it going year to year and get into more schools.
All right, so we will jump in with some questions. For everyone on the call, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat. Gabriella, let's start with, do you have a sense of how prevalent violent or unhealthy relationships are among teens and college students?
I think right now, with the digital age, from what I'm gathering with the students that I chat with and get into classrooms with, I think everybody to some extent has experienced some form of, even if it's not a repeated pattern of behavior, some form of hurtful digital communication. And the reality is, it's crazy how emotional these kids and people can get about it. It affects people's mental state. So I am noticing some of those tactics about social media really come into play. People who will come up and say, well, my partner wants to read all my DMs, and if I have nothing to hide, I'll show them my DMs, but then they find something to interrogate me about and then accuse me about from a year ago that they found in my DMs, because they're crossing privacy boundaries and trying to start a cycle of, this unhealthy pattern of needing to assert some kind of control, to use an example. Those are the intricacies I'm noticing with the digital platforms that students are bringing to the table a lot.
So you had mentioned social media, and thinking about our teens now and the impact of social media, how does that help or harm development of healthy relationships? And how does that impact potentially the kind of proliferation of violence in relationships?
Are you asking how does social media kind of continue this cycle, so to speak?
Yep.
It's weird because, social media is not all bad, right? It helps us band together. It helps us put on fundraisers. It helps us educate. It helps us spread the good word. And in some cases, people can record instances of violence and all of a sudden they win a court case. So it's crazy because social media, for as much good as it does, it also has these downsides. And I think that if we can help students navigate that their self-esteem and their self-worth is not dependent on whether or not someone responds to their text in 15 minutes or doesn't respond for a whole week or 2 weeks. You know, just getting us to have a solid sense of self without the validation of the digital platforms, which is hard for anyone. We're all human, okay? You know, so but really having that and driving that home and just bringing the focus back to each individual, why they're worthy, and putting that into the message as well. Like, your worthiness doesn't depend on whether or not someone else thinks you're worthy. It really, your worthiness comes from inside and your true support system that you have. And if you have a limited support system, the next step is to let them know there is support out there, extra support if you need it. Programs set up. You know, I'm kind of a middleman to the Journey Center for Safety and Healing now, because I was in a support group there, and that really helped me. So, you know, fostering that individual sense of value too, and then letting kids know that there's, you know, help and resources if they need it is another huge part, because then it takes the emphasis off of digital stuff. I don't want to say, oh, social media is going to be the death of us. You know, it's here, and I think it's here to stay. So it's about how do we manage it, and how do we still make sure our self-esteems, our value as a person, our worthiness is still in check.
Let's talk a little bit about what your workshops look like. So what kind of methods and messages do you bring to the students during your workshops, and how receptive are the students to the content that you're offering?
You know, what's funny is I kind of started developing 2 different styles of presenting when I'm presenting. Sometimes schools they just want to one and done, get the whole school involved. So I'm working with more of a little bit of a TED Talk style, which has to do a little bit more with my personal experience and my story. And that's great. But I think where we thrive in education, I think my story is valuable. I think it helps illustrate, you know, when I use certain examples. But I do think that the other style I have, which is mostly individual classes, smaller class sizes, the ability to get interactive, for people to get comfortable, my you know, personality to come out a little bit, loosen up the crowd, and get them to participate and be interactive when we look at types of abuse and, okay, what falls under the category of, what do you think constitutes emotional abuse, and then getting really into the specifics, or using specific examples or headlines or things in the news that have happened, and being able to illustrate so we understand and apply. I think that tends to be very, I just think it's super helpful when it comes to learning, to be as interactive as possible. It's just not as possible with large crowds, but I think that they both have value. They're just different styles. And then as far as being receptive, it's interesting. I have sort of learned to navigate how to approach an all-male crowd versus an all-female crowd versus a mixed crowd versus a small crowd versus a big crowd. And those are kind of all the intricacies that come with public speaking, I guess. I think for me, I know when I'm speaking to an all-male crowd. Actually, I've been super well received at, like, John Carroll football and BW football just had me, and those kids were awesome. Like, they totally participated. They were not rude. I think if you come in with the right energy, those crowds are more receptive, because you got to think about it. I'm a woman, so you got to wonder, and I'm a white woman. You got to wonder, like, how receptive am I going to be to people who don't look like me or who are a different gender than me? Is the message going to resonate? That's a risk, you know, I'm willing to take, because I still think the message means something. So I just kind of dance around with how to finesse, how to be most effective with those crowds. And I think I just rely on coming in with the right energy and making sure I put my disclaimers up high that, you know, my program's not to generalize that all men are abusive at all. This is just about being able to identify the patterns of behavior and help each other, because what we know is that we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different experiences.
So what geography do you generally serve? Is it Cuyahoga County, Northeast Ohio, beyond this area?
I'm mostly in Northeast Ohio. I've gone to a lot of different places. I've been in Pennsylvania. I did a virtual Florida one, but mostly, I mean, shoot, all across Ohio. I've been in Cincinnati. I've done schools on the east side, west side, Revere, Blackbird School District, so Lakewood, Westlake, Olmsted Falls. I'm kind of all over in a sense. Berea, I've been south too. So kind of peppered around Northeast Ohio mainly, but always looking to expand. I think that's a huge thing, is always looking to expand.
So over this past year and a half, have you noticed a shift in the conversations that you've had with high school students pre-pandemic to now?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I've noticed a shift per se. I think, I guess that kind of speaks to how digital we have become, because you'd think like they'd be like, oh, everything is so much more, because we spent so much time in isolation, everything's so much more digital. But the truth is we're already digital in a way. So some of those same issues about surrounding social media, I should say, are definitely there. But I haven't picked up on anything specifically pandemic related, other than probably people starting to feel maybe a little more lonely, or that they need some validation to some extent.
So what tools might you offer to young people who identify that they are in an abusive relationship?
So one of the final segments of my presentation when I'm interactive with students is how you would help someone in this situation, or help yourself in this situation. Sometimes I like to preface it as, how would you help a friend? Because that way the conversation doesn't get awkward about, well, if I'm in this situation, people don't want to make it their own. But we talk about, how would you help somebody who is going through this, if you had a friend or a family member going through this. And I always try to drive home that there are resources to help people. We don't know that they exist unless sometimes we don't even know that they're there. And then by the time we know that they're there, it's because we're in a situation that's not ideal. And that's just the reality. But it is still important to let kids know that those resources exist. So I try to let them know about the online, the hotlines that they can call. Regionally speaking, the programs that are set up in the community or on campus to help students. Some people don't even know that they've got things set up on their campus devoted to help students through tough times, because sometimes we're like, oh, we go to school and we can only talk about school, and we can't be people, and we can't talk about our personal things because it's all about school, and we put a lot of pressure on people to perform at school, but reality is we're still holistic, we're still humans, so that help is there at school. So I try to let kids know that those are available. And then when it comes to having the conversation with somebody who may be in this situation, I really try to encourage kids to use I statements. So, you've got a loved one who's in a really unhealthy situation. It doesn't mean that you having this conversation with them is going to immediately make them leave the abuser, because we already know it's a difficult process. But you can really be effective in planting a seed, or moving someone to take action, or they can't unhear what you have to say, basically. Same with addicts, when you talk about interventions. Once you intervene with an addict and you say how much you love and care about them and how much their addiction's hurting you, they can't unhear that information. It can tend to be pretty effective. So it's no different with this. But if you were to approach someone, I just try to give them the tools to be more effective about it. So if you're going to, let's say your mom is dating someone, a new boyfriend who is abusive verbally, okay, and maybe not physically, but he throws things from time to time. He argues with her and interrogates her so much that sometimes she's late for work, or she ends the workday crying because she's so stressed out because she was late. So we try to use a specific example, and I'll say, okay, how would you approach your mom in this situation? I encourage them not to throw hands with the abuser. And here's why. Because that can backfire, okay? That can backfire. Now you could get charges pressed on you. Now you could have irritated the abuser even more. Now mom is in a situation of more distress. That's not the approach we want to take to be effective. In fact, we have such a hard uphill battle of changing an abuser to begin with. Abusers, they say, are harder to change than addicts. I keep bringing up addicts because I have, addicts in my family, and they're compromising their ability to build healthy relationships. And what we know about addicts is that they're more inclined to change just because they usually, at some point, have consequences to their actions. You know, they've gotten too many DUIs, they've driven their car into a tree, they lost custody of their kids, they lost their job. Sometimes addicts are more moved to change because they hit what we call rock bottom. When we're talking about abusers and master manipulators, they get their needs met by manipulating. They don't really have a strong inclination to change. If they lose somebody, they will replace them, you know, to continue their abuse. So they don't have, it's a harder uphill battle to even approach the abuser or have a conversation with the abuser. So that being said, the most effective approach is to have the conversation with mom or the person who's being on the receiving end of the abuse. And you want to have the conversation when the abuser is not around, because they'll try to discredit your conversation. We know that would be messy. And what you want to do is use I statements. So instead of saying something to the effect of, you've stayed in this too long, you should have known he was bad news, you're breaking up the family, you're late for work, you're going to lose your job, you're letting all of this cost us and our family and our health and our peace. Instead of you statements, which automatically put listeners, no matter who you are, on the defense, come in with I statements. Mom, I care about you, and that's why I wanted to bring it to your attention. You know, that I'm concerned about some of the behavior I've noticed, and then be specific. I noticed that sometimes you're arguing so much with him that you're late for work, and I know how stressful that is for you and how you're left in tears from time to time. I know you deserve unconditional love and respect. I want to see you happy. I feel that this isn't healthy. I'm worried about you. I want you to know that I love you and support you. And if you need help, it's available. And you can even bring up the resources if it feels fitting at the time. But using I statements are so huge and just way more effective than, you know, throwing hands with the abuser, trying to chat with the abuser, you know, or trying to come in with you statements with the person that you care about.
Building on the dynamics that individuals in these relationships feel, often they can feel quite shameful, or a lot of shame for being in an abusive relationship, which can make communication and these conversations that much more hard. How do you combat the shame that might be felt by someone in a relationship like this?
I think I statements help diffuse that a little bit. If you come in with saying, I'm not judging you, I care about you, I support you, and leading from that starting block, I think it puts people a little bit more on the, okay, I'm not, because, you know, my friends did that for me. My friends, you know, I was in a violent situation with my boyfriend when I was in school. So I was in college, and I was sort of living a dual life. Like, we were this power couple in front of our friends, and then behind closed doors, it was like a whole nother story. And finally, the one night that he just went off the rails in front of my friends, they were not going to forget it. And they kindly told me, well, first they contacted the violence prevention center that I didn't know existed on campus. And, you know, they said, how do we help our friend? This is bad. This guy is like hostile. And they advised my friends to use the I statements. And I'll tell you, it really worked on me because I didn't feel like I had to keep it a secret anymore. Like, I was ashamed, like you mentioned. Shame is a big part of it. I am ashamed that I love this person who is also could be so terrible. Like, I'm embarrassed to even talk about how bad this could be. But once my friends told me, I'll never forget my best friend telling me, Gab, I love you, but I'm not going to support it if you stay with him. And that, I just remember that sentence. I don't remember everything else she said, but I remember that she said, I love you. I care about you, but I'm not going to support it if you stay with him because your safety comes first. And that was like, your friends in college become your family. She is my family. She's my sister, basically. So hearing that from people that I really cared about, my family echoed the same sentiments. It was like, oh man, I was in denial. I was like, come on, guys, give him another chance. He can get help. But we tried all that. And it was like, you can't force someone to get help. I just had to trust that my family and friends had my best interest in mind and knew what was best in this situation. And that's what I did. I trusted the people around me, even though at the time I was delusional and didn't feel like it was necessary. And I was willing to give other chances and blah, blah, blah. I was willing to continue the cycle of violence, to be quite honest. And so I do think that using I statements helps mitigate that shame because you're saying, I care about you. It's not you. It's not your fault. You know, you're implying that it's really not your fault. His behavior is not your fault. And that's huge.
How did you find the strength to go public with your story and start this organization?
I found the strength through support group and taking sociology classes. And honestly, from my friends. My friends were so supportive. I felt like, what a relief. I don't have to keep this such a secret anymore. And they're not judging me about it. They're straight up on my team about it. They're like, this isn't your fault. You're an amazing person. So having that support was huge. And support group was so healing for me. It was the first time I was around people who were sharing stories of very similar situations that I was in. So that was the first time that I was genuinely starting to believe, okay, it's really not my fault if I don't call back in 15 minutes that I'm a disobedient girlfriend, or if I don't hand over my text messages, or if I don't wear a crop top, if I have to follow all these rules and I refuse sometimes, that doesn't make me worthy of abuse, you know? And it wasn't until I was in support group and we were actually talking about these scenarios, you know, because before, like I said, it was just kind of inside. I wasn't really talking to anybody about it. It wasn't until I had that piece of healing in support group and education that, you know, I felt the courage and strength to help other people. It really wasn't about me. It was more about, wow, these people helped me so much. To use like a little bit of a parallel, I didn't win a single race when I was dating this person. I was exhausted. I was drained. I was anemic. I was tired. I was arguing till 3 a.m. every night and showing up to practice and going to class and all this, but I was in turmoil. I was exhausted. It does weigh on your emotional and physical health. It wasn't until after I got help and I just separated myself and I let go of this relationship that I started to feel lighter and freer and more empowered. I was with the support group was helping me. My sociology classes were helping me. My friends were behind me. And that's what kind of gave me the courage to be like, okay, I feel like I'm in such a better place. How can we help other people not let it get to how bad and dangerous it was for me at one point? How do we help people? Because I feel like I got amazing help and I think we should pay this forward. And that alone gave me all the courage I needed. I don't even know how Love Doesn't Shove got started, I don't remember how I got into my first school. I'm not a salesman, so I'm not good at emailing people and asking if they want my present. I don't know how it spitballed into what it is now. But I just know that, you know, because I had those divinely orchestrated intentions, I think it's just taken off. The intentions are there, and that's why I'm here.
So what's the long-term plan for Love Doesn't Shove? And how can those of us who are interested in supporting your work and getting involved, how can we help you achieve that plan?
You know, the long-term goal, I think it's hard because sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to go national and I want to get in more schools, but I'm only one person. Maybe it's about getting more speakers involved, you know, and I've always thought about that. How can I get more speakers involved or more men involved or more sports programs involved? I think in terms of keeping it going, I'm not a good fundraiser person either. Like, I'm good at presenting. I know my strengths. I'm great at presenting and resonating with students and trying to build this meaningful conversation. I'm not as great in like the fundraising aspects and coordinating how many schools to get into, you know. So I'm always working on those to be able to expand the message because I do think it's valuable. So I think that's where teamwork can kind of come in. And I was nice enough of BW football actually just asked me, after I gave a presentation to their football team, they were really happy about it. And they were like, you know, let us know when John Carroll plays BW, which is this Saturday. Let us know if there's anything, you know, we can do to spread the message. So they're going to do a little video message on the board. I'm going to bring some Love Doesn't Shove wristbands to try to sell at the gate. I don't know. Guys, I'm not a fundraiser. I would love to have help fundraising so we can keep this going, get more schools involved and get more speakers involved. So I guess, when I see this going in the future, I might have to step up my fundraising game, get more people involved. Always happy to work with people. I'm a team player, so.
Gabriella, we appreciate you so much sharing your story, your vision, and the work that you do, which is so important and such a topic that needs to be elevated and needs to have the awareness raised around it. So we thank you for being here today. I will be sure to share your website in our follow-up email and encourage everyone on the call, if you are interested in helping out or bringing Love Doesn't Shove to your school or organization, please reach out. So Gabriella, thank you so much.
Yes, awesome. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for your time, Gabriella. We're so inspired by your courage and your passion, and don't stop spreading your message. We'll do everything we can so that it can reverberate all across Northeast Ohio. Thank you.